Hello, bonsoir. Thank you for coming, and sorry because we are a bit late. So I am Marie-Mathilde, one of the managers of ArtEvolution, with my colleague Milena, just there. So I would like to introduce you quickly what is ArtEvolution. It's the second edition of ArtEvolution, a program of the Goethe Institute. ArtEvolution is a program that supports that we are supporting are all here tonight. So part of this program, we had a 1-week residency, a trip to Germany, and these are the public events. So we have those impulse sessions. So it's talks that are curated by Khalil Hamdan. We had 2 weeks ago the first talk with Lawrence Abu Hamdan. Tonight we are welcoming Fares Chalabi that came from France. And the talk will be moderated by Maissa Maatouk, that is just here. Sorry. And I will let the mic to Alia, so the curator of the Out of Sync, this series of talk. She will explain you a bit further what is the aim of those series of talk. And I would like from now, because last time we didn't have time, to thank the team of Zoukak that is welcoming us. So a big thanks to all of you.
Thank you, Marie-Mathilde. So hello, everyone. Thank you for being here with us tonight, and also thank people joining us from elsewhere via networks. I would like to thank the ArtEvolution program to invite me to create the series of talks for their impulse sessions, and for sure Marie-Mathilde and Milena for organizing this event, and Zoukak for hosting us. So just 2 words about the oratorial note. The series of talks were thought as an invitation to reflect on the current state of the acting body in the time of collapse, in the temporalities of the collapse, in contrast with the time of war and reconstruction. And I think the choice or the strategy was to really try to think about the body that operates within the political context, how it acts, navigates, and registers the effect of the sectarian political context and currently the collapse, to get at questions of performing arts and the body of the performing artist and the actor. So another thing I would like to say is that I think the 2019 protest kind of made it possible or allowed that a sort of collective entity or body be formed, let's say performatively, like by means of gestures, slogans, actions, chants. And I think this event kind of make it possible for us today to gather and reflect around the politics of action and the politics of performing arts. So I addressed this invitation to 𝗁𝗁𝘁𝗁𝗁, Fares Chalabi, and Lawrence Abu Hamdan, because I believe that their aesthetic approach to how art can be thought and conceived in the Lebanese political context can be very conducive for our present talks and conversations. And I invited Maissa Maatouk and Lamia Abu Khadra, who are interested in these questions, and to curate the talk. So Maissa Maatouk will curate the talk of Fares Chalabi, and next week Lamia Abu Khadra will curate the talk of 𝗁𝗁𝘁𝗁𝗁𝗁. So next week 𝗁𝗁𝘁𝗁𝗁𝗁 will be giving a talk the same time on Friday, November 4th. Yeah, maybe I will present briefly Fares talk tonight. Tonight, Fares will explore the way action is conceived in the Lebanese context, and I think he will do that by contrasting different conceptions of actions and by framing action in relation to different historical phases of Lebanese history. Finally, I will simply present Fares Chalabi and Maissa Maatouk. Fares Chalabi was born in Beirut in 1977. He obtained a BA in philosophy in 2002 from the Lebanese University and a diploma in architecture from Alba in 2004. Fares continued his study in philosophy at Paris 8, where he obtained a master and then a PhD in 2017. He taught philosophy and art theory at the American University of Beirut, St. Joseph University, and Alba between 2012 and 2021. Today, he lives and teaches in Bordeaux, and his main fields of interest are the study of ontological argumentation, ethics, and aesthetics in line with the Deleuzian approach. Maissa Maatouk is an artist based in Beirut. Her work often takes the form of videos and looks for aesthetic strategy to overcome the neutralizing effect that sectarian power has on the body. Filming is for her a way to act, to generate suspended space-times outside of the grid of the sectarian space. In 2017, Maissa graduated with a master's degree in product and global design from Alba. And in 2019, she was the recipient, she had a fellowship at, she was a fellow at 𝗔𝗀𝘀𝘁𝗿 home workspace program. Currently, she works as a studio assistant and production manager with artists in Beirut while developing her own projects. So thank you. The mic is for you, Fares.
Thanks. Thanks. Well, thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you for coming, and thanks to everyone who made it possible. So this is an academic lecture for a change, and hence I'm gonna do like what Alia just said, meaning expose a number of concepts related to the aesthetical configuration over the past something like 40 years or 45 years, just to set up the context. So the story begins, as you know, with what we call the sectarian system, or what I call the sectarian system, which is actually not really what we usually understand by the confessional system, الطائفية. It's a bit different. Sectarianism for me is two sections, two parts, and the confessions are one of the parts. The confessions meaning the electoral way that we go through via the confessions. This is one section. The banking system and the service system is the other section. So this is what I call it, a sectarian system. If you want, in Saudi Arabia, it's also a sectarian system because you have the petrochemical industry, which is one part, and it's coupled with, let's say, Wahhabism, Al Saud, kind of tribal governance, which is the other part. And usually the center of capitalism creates on the periphery sectarian systems, all kinds of sectarian systems, meaning it couples a very well developed part with something which is not that developed or archaic or whatever you want to call it, in order to be able to control things or to manage these places. As you know, if you read Fares Chalabi, History of Modern Lebanon, this is how he describes things. The confessional electoral configuration allows the control by a number of families of the resources, and the banking service systems allows the kind of profit-making with the center. This is what I understand by a sectarian system. You have these two parts which are structural for me. Now, so today I'm going to talk about the body in relation to that. Not only the body as acting, and the body I conceive it in two ways. The body is a sensory motor organization, meaning the body, as you know, you hear, you see, you move, you have feelings, you are hungry, meaning you have impulses and drives. Sometimes you remember, you dream, so on and so forth. So all of these are mixed together, or there's a montage. The body is a mixer. It's a montage machine because we can conceive it like that today. We can conceive it as what brings together these different channels of sensation, affection, perception, action, and the rest. So the body is a configuration. It's a sensory motor configuration on one hand, and it is the represented body, meaning how the body looks. Is it strong, not strong? Is it wandering around? Is it, how it looks? The represented body, which for me are not the same, even though they are related, they are strongly related. So I want to a bit show hands the body in its two aspects in the sectarian system, meaning how this kind of division between confessionalism and service sectors affect the action and the body. Now, you see, the issue is that, or at least I think that there's a specificity for the aesthetical configuration in the sectarian system. Now, if you take as a contrast the basic Hollywood sequence, which is a cowboy movie, you see a cowboy coming, he sees an Indian, he gets pissed off, he shoots, the Indian dies, and everyone is happy. So this is, if you want, the basic sensory motor organization with a narrative and with a political dimension. Now what happened in this little sequence? What happens is that when the cowboy sees the Indian, this is perception. When he gets angry, it's affection. This is, the action is about to happen. When he shoots, it's action perception again. And then he conquers, he wins, he is able to realize the American dream. And the American dream consists in a community based on conquering the land and colonizing the land. So what you see here is that when you have a clear concept, as we call it, when you have a clear idea, which is the American dream back then, consisting in conquering the land and eliminating the autochthones, this is the idea that allows you to coordinate your body. Meaning you wouldn't get pissed off at the Indian if you don't understand that he's an Indian and hence he's an obstacle to realize this dream, and this is why you act and this is why you do what you do. Just as a contrast, later on in the 60s and 70s, in the movies made in the US, we started to see Indians when you take drugs. I don't know if you've seen The Doors and movies like that. When you take LSD, you see an Indian, which means that things have changed. Things have changed, meaning it's not anymore part of this ideology of conquering the land, so on and so forth. Now, me, what I'm trying to show is that in Lebanon, the body is not oriented by a clear concept. Why it's not oriented by a clear concept? Because you already have two from the beginning. From the beginning, Lebanon was created as a metastable entity by Gouraud in order to have this thing which is not very stable and which has two concepts. As Fares Chalabi says, it is at the same time constitutional, and you have the Misak al-Watan, which is quite weak. You have two founding texts at the same time. The Constitution, which is very like a copy-paste almost from the French Constitution, and you have the Misak al-Watani, which is confessional, partitioning the seats, so on and so on. So you have a dual concept instead of having one idea, and this is going to create weird effects. So one of the movie makers that is going for me to incarnate that during the heydays of war is Baghdadi. Baghdadi for me is someone who worked during all the war, but I'm going to focus on the 1980-1990 period, which was, like 𝗔𝗀𝘀𝘁𝗁 says, which used to be the days of chaos. It's the war where there weren't even anymore any ideologies of any sort to guide this war, especially after 82. And it was, things were left for the warlords to cut the cake and everything with it back then. So at that time, 1982, 1990s, Baghdadi made a number of movies, and one of them is Liban, terre de miel et d'encens. In Liban, terre de miel et d'encens, it's a story of a French doctor who is volunteering to do some medical work in Lebanon, and he gets to Lebanon, and the first thing he sees is this. This is the arrival of the doctor. This is the doctor, and he's arriving from the airport to Lebanon, and this is how the movie opens.
الوطنية والتقدمية تحصل التسويات الطائفية والمذهبية وتدعو لإطلاق المشروع الوطني الديمقراطي وبناء مجتمع العدالة والمساواة، والفريق الجزائري يدعو إلى تسجيل الأزمة. والتقدمية تحصل التسويات الطائفية والمذهبية وتدعو لإطلاق المشروع الوطني الديمقراطي وبناء مجتمع العدالة والمساواة، والفريق الجزائري يدعو إلى تسجيل الأزمة.
So this is really like the opening sequence, and here I just wanted to show you how you have two series. You have the war series, you have the advertisement civil series, and the body is composing both series. I insist on that because the body is not doing a metaphorical fusion or composition. If you take Eisenstein used to say that if you want to compose two series, what you do is you make the actor play like the pig, for example. If you want to represent the bourgeoisie as pigs, Eisenstein in his writing used to say, well, it's very simple. You take the movement of the pig, you make the actor move like the pig while he is playing the bourgeois. And this is how you understand in this metaphor that the bourgeois is a pig. So what I'm trying to say is that the metaphor is possible by fusing two dimensions of two series, pigs and bourgeoisie, because you have a clear concept. Why? Because in the Marxist communist kind of view, the bourgeoisie are the enemy, and they are filthy, and they are greedy, so on and so forth, so they are represented by the behavior of the pig, and this is why you can make a metaphor. You can make a metaphor. The condition of possibility of the metaphor, as 𝗔𝗀𝘀𝘁𝗁 will say, will say later, is the unity of the world. You can only make a metaphor if, for you, there's a kind of meaning that pervades or unifies everything, and this is when you can transfer. This is why you can put in dialogue and make fusions between animals and humans and mountains and so on and so forth. Now, I think that in the sectarian world, or what I call in the sectarian aesthetics, you can't have metaphors. What you have is the presence of a dichotomy structuring the objects, where the object itself is two things at the same time without having the possibility of a fusion, of a synthesis. These are the cars of Walid Raad. The cars are bombs. It's not a metaphor. It's like actually the car is a bomb and a bomb is a car. And this is how you have this object taken into two series. This is what we can call a cis narration. It's a cis description, not narration, which is not a metaphor. Metaphors, I think, if you want to do them here, it would be a bit dangerous because immediately it would be projected into an atmosphere which is a bit of the center of capital and not of the periphery of capital. Now, this is another image showing this kind of duality. This is the governor of Banque de Liban inhabiting this dual space. And this is by 𝗔𝗯𝘀𝘁𝗁, where you have the Kalashnikov and this pretty woman on the cover, and you have these hands, 2 series. This actually is very recurrent. If you start noticing it, you find it a little bit everywhere. Now, so if you want the body or the acting body in the sectarian world, at least at that time, had to go and manage to move on 2 series all the time. And hence, the doctor, in the movie that we have seen, arrives to the hospital, and the hospital happens to be a school. So you already have all these permutations, and the school is actually occupied or protected by militiamen, so have all these layering. So the doctor arrives at the hospital, which is not a hospital. He meets this little girl, which is already enamored with him. They enter the hospital where they sell cigarettes and guns and all kinds of things. Here you see a bit this kind of again, these dual directions. He meets the chief doctor, which talks to him about porn movies while operating on a dead guy. And when the French doctor takes his function, some members of a militia go in and start shooting everyone because they're looking at 𝗔𝗯𝘀𝘁𝗁𝘁. The doctor is held a little bit hostage. Then he goes to a dinner where they sing Fares Chalabi and they drink arak because one of the guys who was in a coma woke up. In order to close this evening happily, they go to the beach and they start shooting at non-existent Israeli invaders, and he screams against Israeli invaders. The doctor crosses the border to the East Beirut and starts saving or operating on the eastern side. In the meantime, the other doctor is playing piano to wounded people. People are having some skinotique, and the French doctor has a meze with a discussion on life and on the Lebanese war. After that, he crosses back to the West Beirut. And when he crosses back, he gets kidnapped by his host, with the guy with whom he was singing Fares Chalabi, which holds him in a pigeon house above the building, where he meets again the little girl that was enamored with him, and she starts telling him stories, trying to convince him that he's a prince living in a castle. And the movie ends with a big explosion where the doctor is able to fly out and back to his function. Now, why I told you all of that? Just for you to see the hectic movement of the movie. So if you watch an Eisenstein movie or a Griffiths movie or even a John Ford movie, which are classical action movies, you have usually a line, a narrative. Now, a narrative consists in what? A narrative consists in decomposing a real situation in accordance to a rational articulations. What does it mean? If you take Eisenstein, the most classical example, Eisenstein, let's suppose he wants to make a movie about the Russian Revolution. The first thing he does is that he understands the Russian Revolution. What is the Russian Revolution? You have the workers, the capitalists, you have the thugs, the police, and then you have the events. You have an incident. Let's suppose like in the Potemkin, they want to serve them raw, rotten meat, incident. Gathering of the workers or of the matlab together, confrontation with the captains, new incident, insurrection, and then the boat is taken over, the boat is then driven to Odessa, so on and so forth. Until the end, meaning until the conclusion, which is we win the revolution, or we are able to achieve that. Now, I told you this storyline with all kinds of jump and hectic actions because these actions are not cut in a rational way. There's absolutely no way to know why that he's going to end up on the rooftop, talking to the girl, being kidnapped by his host, shooting at fictitious Israeli soldiers, so on and so forth. There's absolutely no rationality in that. And on the other hand, what you see is flips. Meaning, Maroon Baghdadi's, if you want, aesthetical problem is to find in a situation, the next situation that is going to be the most contrasted and the most unexpected while jumping from sectarian to civil or from civil to sectarian And this is how you end up saturating your space and your time. This is why I think, that here, of course, in Baghdad, you have a story which is a narrative, and it looks like a line, but you don't have a line, because chronology's main condition is to have temporal sequences connected by rational relations. This is why classical cinema calls these cuts rational cuts. Rational cuts, I cut in accordance to what I understand. So this is 𝗔𝗯𝘀𝘁𝗿, which is the scenarist of Baghdadi, who worked with him on 𝗔𝗯𝘀𝘁𝗿𝗁𝘁. And this is when he says about the configuration of action in the sectarian world. So 𝗔𝗀𝘀𝘁𝗿, Baghdadi explained to him how he should write for Lebanon.
Il y avait un truc qui était adorable. Moi, j'habite à la campagne, à 80 km de Paris. Et donc, Maroud venait une fois tous les 2 jours à la maison. Et alors, en plus, c'était tout lui, ça. Il disait, tu ne prépares pas de déjeuner. Hein. Et il arrivait avec des tas de trucs, des tas de plats libanais qu'il avait fabriqués ou qu'il avait achetés, etc. Et on faisait un festin d'enfer avant de s'enfermer dans mon bureau. Et là, on parlait. Alors, je lui disais ce que j'avais écrit, cette scène que j'avais écrite. Et il me disait, non, toi, ça ne se passe pas comme ça là-bas, ça, c'est pas ça. Il corrigeait les choses. Il essayait de me faire comprendre ce qu'était vraiment le Liban. Jusqu'au jour, d'ailleurs, où il a dit, mais tu ne comprendras pas tant que tu n'auras pas fait une chose qui va te paraître bizarre. Il faut que tu ailles manger du foie cru sur une feuille de papier journal, sur le capot d'une voiture la nuit. Je dis, Maroud, t'es malade, t'es fou, là. Il dit, non, parce que c'est ça aussi, le Liban. Et donc, je suis à Beyrouth avec lui, et il avait commencé dans une boucherie du foie sur lequel on met des aromates, du sel, etc. Et qu'on a mangé de nuit sur le capot d'une voiture, un capot encore chaud, la nuit aussi était chaude, sur une feuille de papier journal qui relatait je ne sais plus quel attentat, donc une violence extrême sur le bout de papier journal qui s'imbibait de notre régal, de notre festin de foie. Et c'était extraordinaire parce que la douceur du mets que nous consommions et l'amitié qui se jouait entre lui et moi avec, là, sur le journal, les images de violence, ce contraste était extra. Et là, je commence à comprendre. Je commence à comprendre de quel pays tu es, dans quel pays tu vis, de quel pays tu veux parler. Et donc, on a fait Hors la vie.
Okay, so I hope you understood this kind of... So here you see to build this scenario, this action line, you need to have these clear-cut, contrasted thing, a car, low river, raw liver, newspapers embedded with blood, friendship, the moon, and all of these things where you go from one to the other. And if you want, this is the action kind of, the overall field of action in which Baghdadi wanted to picture as the image of the reality which is going on in Lebanon. So this sums it up. It's by Walid Zbib, which is the brother of Maissa Maatouk, supposed to be here from Zoukak. So anyway, I gave this talk a bit twice. So Walid Zbib, which made this Beirut have a nice day. And here you see this kind of, what I call this kind of saturation of action. You have to put the maximal number of contrasted events in the smallest possible space. So these were made during the 80s period. And here you have really like a saturation of action. I picked here a couple of these actions. You have people repairing the street, a guy sniping on people, Dark Vader in the restaurant, a guy getting shot in an ambulance, people making out next to him in the ambulance, a kidnapping, an explosion, a dog committing suicide, people playing rally paper, a guy peeking at the dead woman's panties, and you have here's the veiled woman with the unveiled woman passing by, where another woman is taking a TNT loaded car to have a kind of assassination attempt. So I see here you have this kind of this image really gathers this saturation of action during the war. Now, in Little Wars, the stories goes the same way. I'll just highlight the main event. So this is Talal, and Talal is a character which is secular. If you want, his polarity is the civil polarity, and he's leading his nice life as an AUB student, kind of student in Lebanon, before he flips. So Baghdadi structured his movie here into two areas. You have the mountains or the Bekaa, which is the land of the confessions, and you have Beirut, which is the land of the services and you know, the civilian kind of side of Lebanon. So Talal, that was a kind of guy who's interested in music and stuff like that. His dad is kidnapped, so he ends up being a warlord himself. So he shifts. And this is the crucial moment. The crucial moment or action in that time, or even to some extent today, not today, but so it's when you shift from your civilian determination into your sectarian determination. These are the crucial moments which are usually underlined by some emotional treatment in the movies. Either his girlfriend starts to try to hold him back, they have a fight. The key moment, or the intense moment, is when the guy is going to shift from A to B or from B to A. So here the guy shifts. In the meantime, his girlfriend meets Abu Nubul, which is this guy, and he happens to be a photojournalist, to help her kidnap another guy, a banker, in order to pay the ransom of the father of the boyfriend to bring back her boyfriend and continue her life with him. So the kidnapping happened, and the guy being kidnapped ends up in a discotheque. Here you don't see it very well. While Abu Nubul needs to stage his death in order to escape some drug dealers that are following. And here again, you see this hectic montage with characters jumping from one line to the other. And the scene ends up on this closing spiral. If you want, Eisenstein montage, Eisenstein used to call it a spiral that opens up, because you have action, then a new situation, action, a new situation, so on and so forth. Now, the problem in the sectarian world, given that you don't have a unified concept to orient all these actions and emotions, and you have all this jumping around with all these events going from one series to the other in a non-stop way, what you end up having is a saturation of the situation, and the spiral starts to close down. The spiral starts to close down, and this in the movie by Baghdadi is repeated by the girlfriend, who says all the time that I can't bear it, things are not moving, a lot of things is happening, but technically speaking, nothing is happening. And at the end, the boyfriend, Talal, becomes a kind of vampire killer, and he starts shooting people. So this is the last scene of the movie where you see this form of the action as a closing spiral. So this is to sum up a bit the first contrast between these two aesthetics. If you take the general form of narration, be it in the US or the USSR, which are the classicals I'm concerned with, you have the opening spiral of Eisenstein, the SAS prime form. And in Baghdad, you have this closing spiral. It's an SA kind of structure. The body in the American movies is usually an athletics body, meaning you have John Wayne, Marlon Brando, so this kind of actor are quite muscular and they are here to act and punch people. While characters like Abu Nubul, he's more of a polymorphic body. It's a body that transforms by moving from one series to the other. The type of action in the American kind of classical movie is a duel. You always have an opposition. It's either the Indian against the cowboy or the black man against the white man, so on and so forth. While in the sectarian kind of configuration, you have hectic actions, meaning points of explosive actions that just keep following each other one after the other. So between the 80s and the 90s, the actual cut, as I call it, because it's not a rational cut, it's not an irrational cut like in the postmodern cinema. The actual cut means it's a cut between two actualities which have nothing to do with one another. It's like the dog committing suicide next to Darth Vader, next to a sniper. This is what I call an actual cut. You move from one reality to the other without transition, and it's part of the same reality. Actual cuts have this property to create a continuum of really contrasted entities. It's like civil war. Civil war is an actual cut. Now, but between the 80s and the 90s, the actual cut was playing on the surface. You had really like a saturation of cuts, overcuts, overcuts, and it was playing on the surface between all these different series. What happens in the 90s with the end of the war is that you had a vertical actual cut, meaning, as Antonioni says, after the war got internalized. The war which was present, which are our daily bread and which was there, all of a sudden, end of the war, where does the war go? It goes into our memories, it gets swallowed in. And this is what I call a virtual actual cut, meaning it's not, you're still having these two lives now. You have a kind of city center which is being built, peace, so on and so forth, and all the wars that you knew is going to be internalized. This is from Walid Raad again, but this is not from Walid Raad, but anyway, so this is how it looked. There was really like a cut where they destroyed the whole city center in order to make some place to build Solidaire. And when this happened, all the militia people, and not only the militia people, those who lived through the war, what they had now is the war inside their mind, inside their memories. And this is when the body, instead of moving from one series to the other, the body starts to reenact the war, which is a new function that appeared in the 90s. You see people playing their memories of the war, and their body get completely convoluted by the memories of the war. So this is from Daniel Arbide's Seul avec la guerre, and this is how it looks when you play the war.
دانيال أنا صراحة بتعرف شو بعد صورة الحرب بعيني عم بحكي معك وعم بتذكر عم بحكي معك بس عايش بجو الحرب. أنا هلا مش مصدق إنه فيش حرب. أنا ما بصدق. ومليون بالمية بده يصير في حرب. مليون بالمية بكره مذكر وقته. صدقيني دانيال أنا هلا إذا أنا هلا أنا فيش كسب أو مشي بضيع بطلع على الجوكر وأنا هيك. اسمع الكسر. فهمت شو قصدي؟ بسمع الكسر، بسمع الطيران، بنبسط. كل يوم في كسر.
طيب شو أثرت فيك الحرب ببيروت؟
أثر فيها. عملتني زلمة هذا من يمكن عملتني زلمة كان عمري أنا قد إيه 16 سنة 14 سنة هيك شغلت. أول زلمة قاعد على المحور أنا شو اسمه؟ خطوط التماس فوق. وكان شو اسمه هذا معمر غندور هونيك. هلا في دشمة عم قال لي مسؤول يعني كبير، قال لي أي واحد بيمرق اتركه. ساعة بتمرق واحد لابس جعبة قليلة مصلح. ايه جعبة قليلة مصلح كل شيء. شفته ورق امتلأته وانا عم قمص. شو أنا قتلت واحد عم يفرفر شايف عم يفرفر. لا صدقيني دنيا هذا المحور هون أنا هلا في طلقية وما طلقية هيك شغلات مثل البارودة بتبلش تقوسي. عرفتي كيف؟ فينا دور عم تقنصي. لما شفته هيك صرت عمل عليها مات قتلته حرام كذا كذا كذا.
شو يعني صرت ترجو؟
أول مرة بقتل واحد باليوم. يعني بدي لك شغلة واحدة، قتل النفس كثير صعب. عرفتي كيف؟ بس إنه الكتائب كانوا حركة.
كيف بتحس؟ شو حسيت؟
حسيت قعدت هيك صرت قلت شوف وجهي صفار قلت له قتلته. قال لي أمه قاف هذه كلمة قتلته هذا إذا أنت ما قتلته هو بدي أقتله. وسحبتنا زلب معارك لا بدي أنقذ حار صرت حب الدم.
بس وقفت الحرب ما صرت تفكر بالعالم اللي أنت قتلتهم بالحرب؟
Okay, I hope you got the idea. You have now this kind of new configuration. You have the war inhabiting the guy, and on the surface, we don't see it here. You have Solidaire being built. So you have this kind of new contrast between war memories and the kind of clean city center. And this contrast is a new kind of actual cut. Now, these are images from ex-militiamen. Again, you have this with their taken after the war with the old past militia kind of character. Now, Ghassan Chalabi, I think he makes movies in that direction. He makes movies where the character usually, you don't know what's wrong with him. Like in The Mountain, we feel that there's something wrong with this guy, but we don't exactly know what. And the movie consists in this kind of weight, the gravity, and you really feel that it's very heavy, and you move with this character, and you don't know where you're going, and you don't know from where you're coming. And in a kind of informal conversation once, Ghassan told me that the experience on the front, when you're fighting, when you are a combatant, the experience on the front is that you're sitting there, and you can't really rely on your memories or whatever, and you can't really project yourself forward, and you really live as caught between two black zones. And he told me that actually what he tried to do in many of his movies, he told me he doesn't know if it worked or not, but his aim was to really create a movie where you cannot project yourself nor retroject yourself. So practically put, you are in a movie that moves and you remain with the image through the whole movie. And you're unable to anticipate nor to activate your mental associations in relation to these images. And for him, this would be the spatio-temporal treatment of the post-war, but yet a war that is present in the characters that are carrying the war with them. The exact spatio-temporal treatment would be a series of images that do not accumulate in a time, that do not move forward in a time or accumulate in a kind of chronology. In Beirut Fantôme, you had a similar treatment, which is the story of a man who returns, and you don't really know what went wrong with him. And in The Valley too, you have a guy that wakes up as an amnesiac kind of character. So this is, if you want, the weighted past, when the past is weighing on you. Walid in his writings, the concept, Walid Sadeh in his writings, the concept is that he mobilizes is the witness who knows too much. Sometimes what you experience is so heavy and so much that all what you can do is just be there as a pure presence, as a bodily presence to convey that. So to speak about that, this is how it looks. This the weight of the past, where the body is completely anchored or glued by, nailed by this weight. This is from Al Jazeera's documentary on the Lebanese war. So this is
بقيت إحدى شقيقات ماهرة التي أصيبت بعدة أعيرة خلال إطلاق النار بقيت على الأرض حيث سقطت غير قادرة على الحراك.
ثالث يوم اجت ثلاثة اعتدوا علي بعد ما كنت بتساوي في شيء أدافع عنه إلا هذه الصدر كان حدي يعني ترويقة بعضها بالأرض مسكت السكتين وبنحكي يا بروحي يا بروحي وها هيك مت أنا الثلاثة اعتدوا علي.
So this is a weighted testimony where you feel that it's being carried by the one who went through that path. Now this is a form of speech which is a bit different from another one, because in this recalling situation, or when your body carries the memories with it, another form that appears is also a concept that I take from Walid, is forked tongue. The forked tongue, for me, the way I understand it, is when actually the event is of such a violence that your body starts to speak as if it's inhabited by another body, or if you want, your body starts to see as if it is another body, and you have two tongues, forked tongue. So you end up speaking via another tongue, and seeing, I think, seeing and feeling, etc., via another body. This is also from witnesses, or from 𝗔𝗯𝘀𝘁𝗿. And this is another testimony on that.
الوحدة كانت ميتة لابسة قميص طمور قلبي على البيت، بيت مهبط، فكيف اجت فوق البيت كيف شيء ما عرفت. هون كانت ميتة هونيك ومعها ولد ملفوف بلفة ولكن ايديه طالعين، فمبين صدرها مفتوح. كانت لابسة قميص، هي فتحيته كانت ترضع ابنها من قبل ما عرفت. هون صوت ولد انه عم بتأنس وشي، طلع صوت انه عم بيرضع بس امه في صوت، بس ما عم بيبكي، عم بيئن كأنه الواحد عم ياكل بنام او شيء. وامه ميتة، كان عم يرضع من بز امه، كانت امه بشكل هيك على ظهر ميمي وقلبي، ولكن بعد ايدها على ابنها، كان بعد ايدها على ابنها من تحت، وهو قالب على صدر الشمال، ايدها الشمال كانت قالب على صدر الشمال، لان احنا فتنا بالضرب، هي كانت على يميني وقلبي هيك كان على صدر الشمال بالضبط. ف كان هيك شنو طايل بزة انه مش مزبوط متمسك فيه، عشان هيك كان عم بئن. فجأة قال هذا ليك هذا بعده طيب، واحد منهم قال انه هذا بعده طيب، قال خليه ما هلا بنشف شو بز امه او قوس له اياه. قال له ما يمقوس، شو بدنا نقوس فيها بعض ميت.
Okay, I hope you see what I really underline is that is this photographic snapshot kind of perception where each detail is like captured. The language is indexical. You have the breast, the blood, the mouth is this far from the breast. It's as if his perception and memory became like this series of snapshots, and he starts to see in this other way. So the situations of violence, like here, the situation of violence reconfigures the sensory motor organization. And they reconfigure them in this way, where you feel that what you start to see is not of this world, because what is of this world is usually a classical sensory motor organization, where you know what you see, you act, and things are constructed into this way. When this sensory motor organization breaks down, the world itself breaks up into atoms of perceptions which are connected in this stroboscopic way. 𝗔𝗯𝘀𝘁𝗁, after the massacres of Sabra Shatila, he went and he wrote some texts which have the same kind of structure. We have all these snippets of images collected together which are extremely accurate, but at the same time they are quite delirious. So the thing is that when you go through the war and you go through this kind of recalling of the war, it seems that you have two tendencies. The first one is the weight, and the other one is that you open on another dimension. And I think this was often spoken by the people. For example, this is again from عربيد.
مش بعتبر، متأكد إنه في أرواح كتير، مثلا واحد بصروه أرواح كتير، يعني بشكل مش معقول. عرفت كيف؟ تسمع الصريخ والصريخ، بعد الصريخ 5 دقايق انخطفت، مات، الله أعلم شو بصير بقى. ما تسألش.
So I'll just repeat what he said if you didn't hear. She's asking him, do you think there are souls here, dead souls? And he tells them, it's not that I think, I'm sure there are dead souls here, and I hear them speak, hear them scream. So here you have two options. Either the guy is just, a bit sick, or you take him seriously. These are the two lines. As you really think that he's hearing these souls screaming, and he really went to hell, because later on he tells Daniel Arbid that actually he went to hell because he tasted blood, and he lives in hell, and it's not metaphorical. He tells me, I live in hell, and I'm still in hell, and I hear these voices, and I hear the dead people, and this is the opening on the other dimensions. So you have the bodies will either just be weighted by the experience or open on other dimensions. The Palestinian young man that you have seen, opened on the dimension of the actual world, which is also one of the dimensions, but that we usually don't see because it's covered by the sensory motor usual organization. We don't really see things as snippets like that. So this kind of alter dimension brings me to this text by Jalal Toufi, where he writes kind of these sentences which are twisted on each other. So for example, Jalal Toufi writes this, he writes, on the subway train, a father is teaching his child, parallel lines meet at infinity. Two parallel tracks converse, the child is this infinity. This sounds like a mind riddle. I'll read you another one, just for you to feel the riddle. A sculpture of a girl putting on one of her stockings. Is she sculpting herself? A Renoir painting of a vase full of flowers. How pale are the flowers compared to the vase? So what is he doing here in these texts from distracted Jalal Toufi? You see, these are not metaphors. You have the text next to it by 𝗔𝗀𝘁𝗁, which talks about metaphor, like the mountain is majestic. The mountain is majestic is a metaphor, and when you say the mountain is majestic, you show that between the mountain and humanity, you have a kind of common ground, which is that the mountain can be compared to a human being, to a king, or so on and so forth. So the base, 𝗔𝗀𝘁𝗁 says, of the metaphor is God or man. God as the creator of everything, and hence everything can communicate between each other, or man as the new God that is going to humanize nature. So when Jalal Toufi writes that, it's not a metaphor. Actually, it's a bit mind-boggling, because he's mixing the realms. This language is actually, he needs to find a word sculpting. The girl is sculpting herself, but it's a sculpture about a girl sculpting herself. And these points allows you to have this kind of passage between the world of the imaginary and the world of the actual world. In another text, for example, just for you to get into that, called The Crucified, Nietzsche titled his book, 𝗔𝗯𝘀𝘁𝗿, I am the man. Ponce Pilatus, when he was about to crucify Christ, told Christ, this is the man. And here, what Jalal does is that he's going to collapse these two sentences on one another and say, you see, actually, the Christ is Nietzsche by this gate word which connects both, by this gate word which connects both. So what I'm trying to tell you is this. What I'm trying to say is that in a specific form of writing, let's take the writing of Jalal, the aim is to cross the thresholds. The aim is to build a continuum where you move from the world of the actual world into the world of the beyond, and back from the beyond into this world, as if all of that is on the same plane. And I think that the experience of the war, this kind of stroboscopic vision that you have when you are witnessing violent death, or the experience you have that you are in hell when you kill people, this boundary is blurred. And hence the writing of Jalal consisted in showing, or in practicing in writing, the crossing of these thresholds. One of his in his book, What Was I Thinking, is how to cross the different cuts between the regions. So when it comes to the ontology, you have this. The manifest ontology will deal crossing between the worldly and the unworldly. Meaning how you move from something of this world into another world and back from the other world into this world. While the classical structure or aesthetic structure, you have a division between images and concepts, and one informs the other. In the narration of Jalal, you have this crossing of the border. An example of that is he made a kind of movie where the character in one movie is dreaming of what's happening in the other movie. Now, why is he doing that? In the Rear Window Vertigo, the guy in Rear Window, which is the same actor as in Vertigo, he makes a montage where you have this continuum between the two movies, and so on and so forth. Now, in order to be able to navigate between these different realms, what is needed, as Jalal says, is a subtle body. And he says here, one cannot accomplish one's destiny with one body only. Destiny requires the timely collaboration of solving some problem, facing some challenge, responding to some threat, or two or more different kinds of bodies, at least one of which is subtle, imaginal, thus exist in a different kind of space and time than the ones in which one's natural dense body exists. The movement, this guy is a militiaman. When he moves into hell and he's back here, he is in a way using a subtle body, which means, which brings me to the end of the sequence, and maybe I should stop, which means that you have, from the 90s to the 2005, these two versions of the body. One of the bodies is the weighted body that carries the war, and when this body that carries the war moves into an altered dimension, it becomes the subtle body. These are really like bodies which were configured in the during the 1990s till 2005. Now here, if you want, there's a list of all the different kinds of bodies that Jalal talks about. You have more than 70, if you want to go have a look. So you have 70 types of, so you have you have the frozen doubles, the cadavers, the murderers, the dead, the living dead, the dead living, the specters, the revenants, the reincarnated, the zombies, so on. So you have, and they are all very, very different. For example, a revenant is not a specter, which is not a ghost. A ghost is someone who died but with an unsolved story. A specter is someone who is haunting us because we have some kind of guilt towards him. while a revenant is someone who comes back because we thought he was dead. So and here you have really all the nuances. I've counted 70 at least in his different books that that describes these subtle bodies in the plural. So I don't know. So anyway, so really to conclude, because I need to get to today. So this is the last cut. I'll just say 5 words on it. This is what I call a global actual cut. Now, what's a global actual cut? Is that 1990, the actual cut was vertical. It's between you and your memories. 1980s, the actual cut was horizontal. It's between you and the hectic movements you are doing. And what's quite peculiar in the last explosion is that we've seen for the first time, I think, a form of parallel montage in Lebanon. If you remember the videos they made on the explosion, you had the explosion and how it's happening in 𝗔𝗯𝘀𝘁𝗿, in here and there, and you have this kind of parallel montage. What I think is interesting in this kind of explosion is that you have one event, it's one event, that is going to have a dispersed occurrence. You have one event, let's suppose you don't have electricity, and you have the same event, you can see it everywhere. You have one explosion, and this was not the case during the Civil War. Usually explosions were localized. So you have now one explosion, and you see it everywhere. If you have a crisis with medicine, so you have, let's say, the cancer medicine, so you have one event and you see it everywhere. The banking crisis, one event and you see it everywhere, so on and so forth. Which is, I think, an actual cut which is global. It's the same cut that you see all over the place. And that needs to be this, and this kind of actual cut which is global has its peculiarities that I will not develop now, but which usually open on some kind of optical art and pop art. Pop art and optical art, if you take in the 40s, came from the total destruction of Europe. And why it's optical art and pop art? Because you look at things and they have no meaning anymore and you can't do anything with them. So Antonioni says after the war, what do you want to do? You look at rubble. Rossellini is the same. In Germany, year 0, you see people looking at rubble and they don't know what to do. So things start to look as pure optics, which led to the works like Vasarely and the whole art movements that came after that. I think in Lebanon the thing is a bit different, because the end of the war, which is towards 2010, when the 8 group liquidated the 14 group, like they killed everyone. This was practically the end of the war because you had one winner in code, which is still the same up till today. But the end of the war happened, and what happened is that it happened without the destruction. The destruction came later to just validate that actually you live in a place which is emptied from its meaning. You look at buildings and they have no meaning. Your life is cut. Which I think led to a kind of pop forms of art that, if you want, I can cover later in the Q&A because I talked already a bit too much. So I'll stop here, okay? And then later I can talk about this if you want. Too long?
There is a mic.
Hello,
Hi. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
First, just take a logistics.
Logistics.
You can.
Maybe I'm fine. So take your time, all of you. You too, Maissa.
Okay.
If you get tired or bored, feel free to move, have a drink, come back. I really take your time. If you want to ask questions, comment, or have a new talk on top of the talk, go ahead. I'm here for that.
Okay, for logistics,
we
okay, cool.
Me personally, I am very interested in the last part.
The last part.
Which was covered, which is the global cut. How we experience, we have a collective experience in a way.
Yeah.
A bomb or the collapse, but then on the level of action, it gets dispersed. That you have a parallel montage. These parallel montage, they are not part of one or of a collective, let's say, but yet they are the same. It's like duplicates.
Yeah.
I'm just interested to see how you think, like how you would think that, or what you think is the force that creates this dispersion.
Well, if you want, I'll give examples. The examples I gave. You see now the what I call the actual code is occurring on the level of the state, meaning the government itself is a militia, and hence it has effects which are really spread all over the territory. This, if you want, it's the political base for that. And if you take the explosion of the port, I know this sounds weird, but this is a peace explosion. What do I mean by that? It's a kind of consequence of a rotting, corrupted situation. And I think it's different from the car explosions we used to experience during the Civil War, where it was targeted with a political discourse, even if we don't agree with the political discourse, but you felt that it was a kind of war bombing. Now, these are bombs of peace, not of peace, but of the statu quo. So actually, it's a kind of, the situation got degraded progressively to the point where you have a stock of ammonium, if you follow the so far established versions, that explode. And cholera is the same. And the banking blockage is the same. So you have this repetition of these events. So it's different from parallel montage. Parallel montage, if you take an American movie, you have a unity, New York, in all its splendor, and the movie maker is going to show you this unity by showing you parallel complementary parts. In Lebanon, the parallel montage is really about, as you said, a repetitive event or non-event, a repetitive state of collapse or corruption, where you see its effect everywhere. A guy goes to a bank to get his money in Zahle, in Beirut, and Tripoli, all over the place now. You have these incidents, which are the same incident, repeated all over the territory. So this is why you make it parallel montage, but it's not really like to show the unity. It's one event which is recurring or occurring in repetitive ways. Myself more clear.
Yeah. But maybe my question is, can we, or is this a potential to make a unity, or, is there a potential for, let's say, one guy who's going to the bank to get his money, and the other guy who's going to another bank? Is there a way that they can go in one collective action? Because it's not collective.
No, it's not collective, and I think there's no way. I think really, or I'm not a political leader to create the way. I deal with this. And I think there's no, I think there's no way. It's not that no one can do it, but I think it's not the configuration so far. What we see so far is, this kind of thing. You know the story of Sally. So what you see, compared to the actions that used to happen in the war, Sally Hafiz, she saw Irhab Kebab to get inspired in her action, and then it has the dramatic personal story that comes in, and then it's a personal dramatic story that is mediatized and that becomes popular, which is, I think, very different as a political act from, let's say, the communist parties in the 70s who wanted to liberate Lebanon from the capitalist force. It's not the 𝗔𝗯𝘀𝘁𝗁𝘁, nor the Communist Party, nor the Friends of Baghdadi and 𝗔𝗯𝘀𝘁. It's really like individualized actions, which are mediatized, meaning the action is itself projected through its media coverage too. And it has a popular support, but there's no political program going through that. I think these are repetitive actions, and personally I don't see the kind of conversion, even though I think that this is what we have so far. This is what we have. I will not say, like many of my friends, these are bad actions because they are not like, they don't have a political program, nor. We know they don't have a political program, and this is how it is so far. This is all I can say. Yeah.
I'm gonna let people, if who has questions, and I have more questions, but I can jump at certain points. But if anyone has a question or wants to add something or to clarify something, and in the chats.
أنا ما عندي أنا ما عندي سؤال، عندي كومنت أو شيء هيك بخطر براسي. بالإنجليش عم نحكي. Okay. So I don't have a question. I have a comment or something that I'll be sharing out loud. I have been thinking about when you shared Maroon Baghdadi's films and the cuts and how you were actually the cuts and how they're kind of منهم مخيطين kind of tailored very well together. And the only thing, it was very clear to me that it reflects the absurdity back then and how it's quite, it's kind of relatable at the moment. And the only thing I had in mind, and when you showed us Ziad cover, for me, for example, one of the iconic bands that have also reflected that, for example, I don't know if you've seen Soap Kills and Lost, the video, for me, for that, for example, saying, thank you. Seeing, for example, Yasmin walking in a white dress, saying between the cars and let's walk on the beach, there's no siyarat, and seeing this kind of absurdity and contradiction back then, and what's kind of reflected so for me, I just want to say that yes, in some way that some of the things that we don't see, that we see that doesn't make sense, and it's quite clear that doesn't make sense, but maybe the essence or the dynamic that those people were kind of living and they were witnessing, and maybe yes, maybe that video that was produced maybe in the 70s, but as you said, war was inside of us, or inside of them. So that's the way how it was reflected. So I just wanted to say that maybe that all of that kind of vision doesn't make sense, but maybe in the core essence, for me at least, it makes perfect sense. So voilà, that's it. Thank you.
This is what I'm saying. I'm saying that art is an image of reality. It's a very basic and almost super basic thesis. And art, an image is an image of reality. I was saying is that reality is always not, the visual reality, so it's something complex. I think artists, or the artists I like, they're able to get the reality of a situation at a specific time and create the image that really condensates that. I think that artworks are like microscopes and telescopes rather than representation. Because they make you see the real rather than, so yeah. So if the situation is absurd, the image is going to be absurd.
And I have a question.
Yes. Okay.
I wonder how this past impacts people from my generation, or from the generation where we were taught not to talk about religion, to deny the war, and to basically act like nothing of that happened. Oh, I wonder how that kind of comes back in our face.
Yeah. Now, for how can I say that? But I think the denial of the war, I see a bit from where it comes, etc. But I really think that, I don't know, me, I have an interest in it because I really think it configures another real. Meaning the war, I really think, opened the gates of hell. And I really think that sectarian systems, not only in Lebanon, all over the world, but I'm concerned with the Lebanese one, they make you experience reality not in the normal way. And what is the not normal way is, for example, that you go to hell and you come back, or you see ghosts, or you hear voices. This is the most obvious part. So the war, if you can transfigure it, if you can transmutate it, meaning turn it into an image, I think it's proposing another. I think it's opening on something which is not the what we call the sensory motor, usual aesthetics and ontology. So if you take Jalal Toufiq's text on how you have a subtle body and you travel across different dimensions, if you're a dancer or someone who has visions or a telepath, so on and so forth, all of these themes, as far as I'm concerned, come from the war as being transfigured. So for me, the war is a kind of, my work, it's a kind of material that is going to be transformed. So now, what the new generation can do with that, I think the war made visible that we live in another reality or ontology. Meaning we don't have one unified idea governing images and concepts, and our bodies are well organized and so on and so forth. We have dual concepts. We live in multiple dimensions. We have weighted bodies, subtle bodies, hectic action, so on and so forth. And I think all of that makes you live your reality and produce images to live your reality in a kind of intense way of its kind, not as in. No. Answer a little bit, maybe later.
You spoke obviously extensively about Lebanese film during the Civil War and a little bit afterward. And I know it's a very limited time frame to draw from, but are there any changes that you've been able to observe in contemporary films from Lebanon in their approach to time, action, perception of events? And moreover, do you think the crisis will precipitate any further changes, or is that too little to go off of?
Yeah, I made in more or less details the first phase and the second phase, meaning Baghdadi and let's say Ghassan Salhab, which I think are not the same. Ghassan Salhab is really weighted cinema, no projections, so on and so forth. Baghdadi is hectic, montage, so on and so forth. So these are not the same, have a difference here. I think today with the kind of global cut, repetition of events, the entropy, time is lived as an entropy. It's a continuous degradation. So today you measure time by how much degraded it became. So all of these new features, I think, will give birth to yet a third form of cinema and action and so on and so forth. I didn't see yet the movie who incarnates that, but I know that if you take the image we're seeing, this kind of dramatized action based on one character with a personal story which has a popular support is the seed of what will become maybe one day. We will see a transmutation of that. I don't know what yet, but yes, I think there's going to be a third phase.
And do you think that this heroic image will replace the subtle body in a way, or will will take us away from this, from being in touch with the subtle body?
I think it does. I think it does to some extent. I think the war, the heydays of the war and the protracted civil war, meaning really like the war 75 till 2005, if you want to take it in totality, it really opened on subtle bodies, all forms of witnessing, all forms of speeches, as I tried to show you. And today we're moving into something a bit different that is going to repress a bit all of that, but I don't think in a kind of radical way, because I believe that the optical pop art that is being worked out here shows us that the real itself is becoming an image. What does it mean? It means if you take the difference between Vasarely and let's take Walid Sadiq, the new painting, is that you have a material op and pure optics. Now, for me at least, in my reading, why Vasarely will make pure optics while Walid will make material optics? For me, it's a question. And I believe that in Lebanon, what happened is that towards 2010, with the end of the war, kind of, what happens is that you had the same scenery, but it was emptied from its meaning. What does it mean politically and on another language? It means, you know, this whole struggle of carrying the past, the amnesty law, all of that came to the conclusion that it's useless, that you cannot inhabit this place or do anything in it. So it's not you who is changing your reality, it's happening through this Hezbollah Hariri kind of statu quo back then. And hence, your whole city is like things. It's like an image, meaning like what Antonioni or Rossellini lived in the post-war. So you have this kind of moment where images and realities fuse together. For example, for me, just tell you what I mean by that. For me, this work of Raed Yassin is symptomatic. You can tell me, yeah, what does it have to do? But these are Playboy pictures that he's gonna draw on. He's gonna close them with things. Raed Yassin collects other images like that. I know it looks like nothing, but he has a hobby of collecting images where the image and the real are taken on the same plane, where image and reality are taken on the same plane, and so on and so forth. So I think that this kind of point of fusion between the pictorial dimension and the real dimension, the pictorial space and the real space, I think as a type of perception, I think it's a bit characterizing this 2010-2020 in many artworks. If you take this is from Genadri, where the pictorial space and the whiteness of the wall becomes indiscernible, so on and so forth. So you have, this is from Rishmawi. Yeah, I put them together, like cleaning, and then he cleaned his gallery. Which I like this gesture. Like it's as if the work just consisted here in cleaning your gallery, while people were cleaning the street. This is just after the explosion. So if you want, there's a modality of perception, I think, where images and reality are going to reach a point of discernibility, material, optics, stuff like that.
Yeah, but is there, do you think that it's when does it become dangerous in a way, and when does it?
Yeah. So what do we do with that? This is usually when I talk. Usually they tell me what do we do with that? So and then, I'm not saying you're saying that, but it's how I hear it often. But I think really, when this is already dangerous, because if we are able to transmutate our reality into images, like really be precise. Today, what is really at stake today? Today, we're not inhabited by ghosts and the past anymore. It's just not there. Like, just go to a bar or a cafe and you see people are not talking about they talk about the motors, the generators, the stuff which are going on. And you feel that this event, which is the new event we're living in, cuts all of that out. And what is taken now, we're taken into this new reality where we live on this state. So what I'm saying, this becomes dangerous if we're able to transmutate our real into images. I think, at least this is what I think this is what we can call decolonization, resisting hegemony. The whole project against a cultural hegemony, I think, can only come from first being very specific on the way you see, you feel, you think, you perceive, and you act in a situation. First, you have to be sensitive to that. And then you have to transform that into images. And this is when you can escape Hollywood, the NGO discourse, to make it like a caricature, not discourse and not actions. The kind of democratic passepartout formula. And I think this is the way to resist that. If you take my problem with the insult by Dwayne, it's a fun movie, it's fine, it's well done. My problem is that he takes a shape which is a Hollywood shape. You have solid characters, duels, resolution, democratic conclusion, the big unity at the end with everyone applauding, etc. Okay, I think when you take this form and you put it on a Lebanese context, and he's putting it on the 90s context, with what we've just seen, meaning people have it by memories which are flipping on both, which are flipping in their memory, not being able to live their presence. But he transformed all of that into a simple kind of psychological thing. So you have unified characters, which is not the case in the 90s characters, like the guy you just seen. And when you put that shape on that, you end up having very weird effects. This is what I think. I think you know, having very weird effects like we all suffered from the war and we're all citizens of the same world. Because I think the real gets distorted by these imported shapes. So for me, resistance begins by transmutation. Really, it begins there. This is why I think art is extremely important, because it is what opens on the transmutation, and on a struggle which happens over time, like over 50, 100. So yeah, this is how it gets dangerous. This is what I think how it gets. Yeah.
Adia?
Fares, you talked for the first part was Baghdadi on a form of body that is zigzagging or saturated by hectic actions.
Yeah.
And then the body in the post-war that is either weighted or the body capable of circulating between realms.
Yeah.
Can you tell a bit more about how you see the figure of the body now in relation to this period you are describing as being optical or something like that? And maybe a second question to think about the talk of last week, the returnee as per Lawrence, this person who is present in the present of today, but that is still registering effects of war, be it in the form of reincarnation and the talk of how do you see that as part of a new regime, or it's how do you see this also figure of the returnee of Lawrence?
For me, the returnee or the revenant of Lawrence is thought, at least for me, in the categories of the 90s kind of configuration. I think it's a kind of subtle body that goes into altered dimensions, so on and so forth. And I think Lawrence is totally right to say that this is very subversive because it's speaking a language that is politically annoying to the established sectarian laws. And in that sense, yeah, I think it's part of the, I think Jalal's concept and description of the revenant, in this case, he speaks about this specific case, the reincarnated, which is a bit different from the revenant. The revenant would be someone like in Hassan's movie, the Beirut Fantôme. This is more of reincarnated because he has unfinished business and he needs to come back to speak to us, or else he cannot die, etc. So yeah, I think the potency of that for me is clear. Yeah, being sectarian blind, as Lawrence says, is not that helpful. I think it makes you also blind about many other things, the other dimensions, so on and so forth. Reactivating that for me is extremely important because I think, for me, it's a way out of Plato, literally. It's a way out of a whole configuration of thought which moves towards somewhere else, which moves towards the manifest, where you have all these dimensions existing in the same plane. So this is a bit for Lawrence. For today, the body is not hectic. I'm trying to find through these images something. I think the action is dramatic. Today, drama means a personal story, but it's a drama which is immediately connected to the collective because it's the same drama with everyone. This is why if you want to compare Dog Day Afternoon or Taxi Driver to what's happening in the banks today, you can find a new modality of action. So for me, there's that. So it's individual actions, dramatic actions, which have a popular kind of audience, and then they disappear. See, we had the first bank, and then the second one, and the third, and then they disappear. So this is what I call pop actions, popular, dramatic. It's taken to that dimension. But and for me, if you want, the difficult point is how they relate to their own image. Their own image, because these actions are most of the time self-mediatized, either through social media or through kind of self-staging of. I don't know more than that so far. All I know is that it's different. This is the only thing. It's not the same as, it's a bit different than the 90s and the 80s. Something different is happening, and you can start reading it into these symptoms or these indices.
Anybody else on Zoom or on live?
Thank you, Fares. I may have asked you this question a year ago when you gave an early version of these thoughts at AUB, but I'll ask it again. So, if I'm talking about the early period of the war, 75 to 90, so to recast your words in the theory of Roman Jakobson on the disturbance of speech, right? So he says if someone, so there's the vertical and horizontal pole. The vertical is the metaphorical, horizontal is the metonymic. So if a person has a disturbance in his ability to construct a linear syntactical sentence, there's usually an increased ability in speaking metaphorically and vice versa. So I see, so if bring it back to Lebanon here, so he's saying that the disturbances that occur to our ability to create a metonymic, syntactical, linear sentence did not lead us into create more metaphors, but rather to articulate and to give substance to those metonymic disturbances. I follow that, but what do you do, and this could be completely irrelevant, what do you do, let's say, with a poet who, between the late 60s and the late 80s, 𝗔𝗀𝘁𝗁𝘁, right, modernist poet, who's known, if you read his books, he is an incredible inventor of metaphors, right? I mean, if you take a case like him, and he's not just any poet, right?
Yeah.
How does one read the curious appearance of metaphors at a time when metaphors, in a sense, if you follow your theory, should not be appearing? Is it a curiosity, or does it impinge somehow on your understanding of that period?
Yeah, I see. I mean, unfortunately, I don't. In general, I never read poetry, and in particular also Russian. But I will try to answer without having. But I see the argument, like, what do you do with metaphors? Did exist during that time? It's prominent writers, poets. How do you explain that? For me, I can just explain it either two ways. Either they're wrong, which is the easy way out. You shouldn't have done metaphors. You're actually importing tradition, because the tradition, the poetic tradition in Arabic is very rich. Metaphors, so on and so forth. It's a trope which is not like, so either it's imported, so it's, as I say, it's a bit it's a blind specific. So you just do your architecture or your poetry or your movies as if you are still living in kind of time which allows metaphors and arcades and I don't know what. So it takes an architectural analogy. You can do all kinds of, and they might be, I didn't read on it, they might be simply in the wrong time, meaning they're not in their time. They don't see what's going on under their nose, and hence they continue doing things as they do, which is, I think, personally, even if it sounds not that nice, I think it's a kind of, in quote, mistake which is very common. Meaning importing models from the past or from the future is almost the most common mistake. Like it's almost a reflex, and it comes into the ideological struggle we're in. Meaning, I don't want to be like the Americans or the French. I want to be something, something proper to our tradition, to our language. So you fall in the past, or you go into the modernity, and you could have this kind of effect, which is very, very spread, I think. So for 𝗔𝗀𝘁𝗁𝘁, all I know is that the only time I saw his poetry was in the movie Al-Annas. Have you watched that movie? Yeah, I get everything from movies. So I saw him there. So in Al-Annas, it was interesting, because it's the story of, again, a guy who flips. He goes to eat labne with his friend in somewhere, let's say, on Sadiko, and while she's having a shower, he's supposed to have a guitar, there's a gun inside, he goes to the balcony and he starts shooting at people. And then he comes back, he eats labne. So for me, this is the flip. What's interesting in this movie is that it's intercutted with poetry from 𝗔𝗀𝘁𝗁𝘁 sometimes, like that. And me, I remember that I thought that it's not a good mix. I remember while watching the movie, because actually, the movie maker is trying to do a kind of transmutation of the scenes through the poetry. Yeah, he's trying to not poetize, but to uplift the scenery through the words of 𝗔𝗀𝘁𝗁𝘁 by showing it was about war and death and I don't know what. So I just thought it didn't fit well. The language didn't fit the images well. And this is all I can say about 𝗔𝗁𝘁𝗁𝘁 about that. I really think that when you put a metaphor today, you feel there's something. I feel there's something off, personally. I feel it comes from a different space-time. If I've seen metaphors in movies, in Hitchcock, or in Eisenstein, they're nice, but you feel that they belong to another mental world. This is what I feel. So for me, what comes in the place of the metaphor is the exploration of disjuncted realms, what you call metonymies, which are brought together. And I think this, as a poetic or as an artistic form, is very specific to what's happening with us. And I think it's very promising. Really, I think like to move from one dimension to the other in a continuum, even when it's not metaphoric, it has something thrilling, or it has its own emotions and its own ways of thinking. And this is all. But this is why I would go into an aesthetics which goes against the metaphor.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Okay, so now you just said that like you cannot say that it fits well. I know that sometimes that beauty can be disturbing. Van Wenders once said this. Beauty can be disturbing, so I will not use it fully in my films. So I was very interested in the topic that you were like referring to so many times, but we just saw both in the two footages of 𝗔𝗯𝘀𝘁𝗿 and the other one, because like when we saw, I find that you missed something in there that was like, in Maroon's cinematography, there was like one film about this French journalist that was very interesting in his cinematography. It was very different as well, because like this fascination with the foreign body, some guards were trying to actually approach him, were trying to actually make him more comfortable in that prison where he was after he got kidnapped, and there was like the body was a bit delicate as well, so there was like it was all engulfed in poetry. And this, when we see the two witnesses as well, they were like the two witnesses. One of them was very masculine, and he was like talking about how he hears things. Still, he goes to hell, and he thinks that he's in another place. But the other one, when he was talking about the breast, it was very erotic. And it was very beautiful as well, because like he recollects memories from war in a very different way. So not all people, that's why I think that the representation of a body might be rigid in one place, that there is just one kind of a body that can exist in war. But the representation of bodies can be different, because we hold our bodies as postcards, and like we carry them as wild animals. So they are really truly represented in the outer space and the scrutinized space differently. And you said something about the war, that Antonioni mentioned that after the war they couldn't do something. I guess it's very interesting as well when Godard said that cinema lost its responsibility when it wasn't present for the concentration camps and all what happened with the Jews. So now what I want to really ask is if when the body is not really hasn't been through all of this, hasn't been through war, and but it's still destructed somehow, but in different things. For the domestic life, la vie quotidienne, and all of these things. It cannot lose its intimacy as well, and it has a personal archive as well. It's not the personal archive like the political one that we usually see, but it's different as well, and it's beautiful. So how can we make films that are not self-indulgent when we want to deal with these things that we didn't actually experience? And the body itself, while being distracted not by war, by different things, is still able to actually perceive those things, and perceive and feel and exist in that place. Thank you so much. It was very interesting, really.
So yeah, I understand your question like that. You know, we live also things which are not just of the war, like intimacy, domestic stuff, be it violent domestic stuff or not, so on and so forth. So what do you do with these other aspects? This is how I understood the question. For me, you see, the issue is that I really think you have all the images all the time present in any fragment of the world, all of them. What does it mean? It means that in this room now you have memories, you have actions, you have people who are domestically related, you have love, you have whatever you want. You have all of them now. For me, an image begins with a selection. With a selection, meaning if you want to make an image, you can't just put all the images together. You wouldn't have an image, you will have the real. The real is the totality of the images. So whenever I want to make an image, the first act is to select and be able to say, okay, I'm going to make an image just about perception in war or just about hectic action. Now, what is the principle of selection? For me, the principle of selection is the collective political situation. For example, like Agnès Varda can make a movie about domestic violence. If you've seen, I forget the name, the one with an address. Anyway, she made a movie about Chantal Akerman, Jeanne Dillman, Chantal Akerman. So I mixed both. So Jeanne Dillman, you see a woman doing domestic acts repetitively, and I think it's perfect. But you see that what's meaningful in France back then is this. This is what makes a story in France back then because of the democratic, domestic, consumption societies they live in. Now, in Lebanon, I think the burning question, as Duchamp used to call them, what is the burning question today? The burning question, I think, in the 80s was not domestic life. It was the war. It was what do you do during the war? Who killed who? How do you survive? Now, of course, back then you also had all kinds of things. People eating French fries, going to watch a movie, having love affairs. But I think collectively what was relevant back then was to deal with that. The same in the 90s, the burning question was, what do you do with the memory of war and with all these victims, militiamen, butchers, warlords who are circulating on the surface as if nothing happened. This was the burning question. But I think this reconfigures everything else. How to love in a context where, how to sleep in a context where, how to, today I think we moved into a new configuration. So this is why, for me, of course there are other aspects, but they're, as far as I'm concerned, under one kind of general situation. It's not that it's gonna prevent the other versions, but in that situation, what would be an affect? What would be an affect image during the 80s? I didn't talk about that, but you could have an affective work in the 80s, which is not the action image of that year. What would be an affect image today? These are really headache questions for people who I think do aesthetics or art, but I hope you understood. Yeah, it's clear, yeah.
I don't know if there is more question, but I think we could continue in the lounge and maybe have a drink, even for Fares, maybe. I don't know if yes, except if Maissa, but I think we can all continue all together inside. And thank you so much, Fares. Maissa. And next week, so at the same time, same place, with Walid Sadeh and Lamia Moukhadra. Thank you so much and see you there.